Hey everyone, welcome to That's Cakeable. I'm Janine, and this week I made a special cake for a very special friend. A friend of mine who is around my vintage and had her last child 23 years ago, calls me up and says, I'm having a baby. Well, I had two reactions to that. The first one was, are you mad? The second one was, can I make the cake? So I've split this video into two sections. The first section is how I build and structure very tall cakes for transportation. And the second section is how I made these gorgeous 3D patterned letters that you can apply to any cake for any occasion. I hope you enjoyed this week's video. Okay, so let's build this tall cake. So to build my cake, I've used firstly a 7-inch round cardboard as the base of my cake, which I have drilled a hole into. And now I go ahead and stack and fill my layers to about the halfway mark. When I get there, I have to do a center support so that the cake is stable. So I've added bubble tea straws for my support here. Now, if I'm making a larger tiered cake, I generally use timber dowels. Now I'm placing a center support board, which is smaller than the cake, right in the center. Make sure you're centered because that's got a hole in it too. The same size as the hole in the baseboard. And then continue to stack and fill your layers as usual. Now I've made sure this cake is really well chilled. It helps with stacking tall cakes. So I'm going around now and cutting off all the caramelization around the outside of my cake, putting a top board on the top that's the same size as the baseboard, and making sure that none of my cake comes outside that area. Now this is how we make it secure. So I have a 6mm MDF board that I have hot glued to a 3mm board that's underneath. I drilled a hole through the center of that board, the same size holes as the center board and the baseboard, and then I've put a dowel that I've sharpened into the hole with hot glue. I let it set up and make sure that it's straight. Now I very slowly and carefully place my tall cake over the top, and this is why that center board has to be perfectly centered, because you cannot see what you're doing. It has to be centered so that it will go nicely over that dowel. Now that cake's going nowhere. I come in and I do, of course, as normal, my rough ganache coat, putting my top board back on and checking that no cake is jutting out still, and making sure that the cake is nice, straight up and down. You really need it straight up and down when it's a tall cake because you will see it if it's not. Come back in with my final icing coat of ganache, and then use my scraper using the top board and the baseboard as a guide to get it nice and straight. I ended up giving up on the turntable because it was rocking around too much. And there we have a nice straight up and down cake. Pop that lid off using a hot blade as usual. And then we level off the top. Once again, with really tall cakes, you must have them level. If you don't have tall, long cakes level and straight, it will be very, very obvious. My handy dandy spirit level. And then just smoothing off the top there. Now I went in and I covered this cake in one hit. You can panel it, meaning putting fondant on the top, cutting it down, and then wrapping fondant around the sides. But it wasn't so tall that I couldn't do that. It's just to take your time and secure the top and top edges so that the fondant doesn't drag and rip on the sides of your cake. Smoothing all around the edges, and then using my smoothers to get that nice sharp edge. That was a huge air bubble because my one trick with these cakes is that to adhere the fondant, I use vegetable shortening. That way, if you muck up, you can take it off. However, this does tend to create more air bubbles. So I've taken a very small acupuncture needle and just made a tiny hole in there, pushed all the air to one section, and it came out beautifully. Then I just take off the excess from the base of that cake. And there she is. Now for this one, I added a drip, which was just white candy melts, candy melts. I don't think I'm ever using them again. I didn't enjoy the experience. Now on to making our gorgeous letters. This is part 2. So I've taken some white fondant and added some Tylose to make sure that it is firmer and dries much harder. And we're making the base of our letters, the back of our letters. I am rolling this fondant between 2 spaces because I want all of them to be the same width. Now I printed out the letters that I wanted in the font I wanted and cut around them. And I've placed that letter on top of that fondant and just rolled over it again, which gave me the impression of that B, which you can't see too well on film, but I guarantee it's there. Now I come in with both sharp blades and an X-Acto knife, and I cut around the outside of that letter. Now with the X-Acto blade, the best thing to do, especially with thick fondant, is to first go around and score the letter, which is what I'm doing here, then come back in and cut the letter out. I don't know why I didn't cut out the center of the B straight away, but I didn't, so I went back in and did exactly the same thing. Now you are going to end up generally, unless you're much better at this than I am, with a little bit of mess in the center, but never mind, don't worry, go back in with your X-Acto and just tidy it up. Go ahead and do that with all the letters you're using, whether it's baby or a child's name or happy birthday, and set them aside. Now we're doing the top of the letters, the pattern section. So I've taken another white piece of fondant, rolling it through my pasta machine to make it nice and thin. I started at a level 7, which is my widest setting on my machine, took it down to a 6. And then I've cut it into a couple of sections. So there's trimming off the end. Making that section and setting it aside, you're going to need that as your canvas. And then the rest of the fondant, take over and run through your fettuccine maker. This will make our white stripes. Not the band, just the fondant. Lay them out all nice and straight on your workspace. And then I've gone ahead and done the same thing with my baby blue. Now with that piece of fondant that we put aside before for our canvas, I've wet all of that, and now I'm going to line up very carefully and straightly our blue and white fondant strips from the fettuccine maker, alternating colors. Try to keep them as straight as you possibly can. Cutting off the excess, and then I smoothed over that with my hand and then trimmed off the extra excess. Now I take it back over and run it back through the pasta maker. Make sure that you keep this piece of fondant straight up and down, otherwise your lines will start curving, and that's not what we want. I did that twice, took it down to I think the second thickest setting. Now I've taken that letter again, so make sure you save all your letter templates, and I just stuck that to my striped fondant with some vegetable shortening so it doesn't shift around. And we come in and do the same thing with our X-Acto blade. Just go around the edge of that letter and cut it out very carefully, because they will probably, those lines still may move a little bit, but you should generally be pretty good. Then very gently peel that off. And you have your gorgeous striped letter. Go ahead and do that with all the rest of your letters. And then I've taken the base letters that we cut out earlier, the thick letters, and I just attach the striped letters to the base letters. Now, if you are putting these on the top of a cake as a topper, I would suggest now that you add some toothpicks to those letters so that they sit upright on the cake. However, I didn't do that. I attached these to my cake with some chocolate on the front, added some macarons and some donuts and meringues, and there she is. A gorgeous baby shower cake with lettering that's a little bit different, something different for you to try at home. So there you go, that's it. That's the end of this week's short little video. I hope that you enjoyed it and can use these techniques at home for yourself. If you haven't already, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my future content, which is uploaded weekly. Also, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you have any comments or questions, make sure that you ask me in the comment box below. So I know today was really zoomed through of how I stack and fill and all that sort of stuff with my cake, because it was more about the structure than that part. But if you want to see how I put my cakes together from beginning to end, check out my other videos right here and I show you how that's done there. Well guys, thank you so much for joining me this week. I look forward to seeing you again next time. And in the meantime, you know what to do. Yeah, you know the tagline. Go get your cake on. I'll see you next time. Bye.